not many people can relate to that. And that's not their fault. That's not something that I take lightly. And that's something that allows me to have empathy for other people going through experiences that I don't relate to or quite understand. But I can understand a little bit about the fear that they're going through. Not on the same level, not in the same context, but just fear is universal. Hey, you're back. Welcome to an inside look into the mind of Josh Perry. With that being said, I'm your host, Josh Perry. So it's been 6 months since I recorded the first 2 episodes of my podcast, and the reason being was because I was dealing with a ton of emotional baggage that I was refusing to let go of. I am surprised that I recorded the first 2. I'm also not surprised it took me from December of 2019 to June of 2020 to record another episode. And the reason was I was too worried about myself. And that's the thing that stress does. Stress can come in many different forms, many different paths. It can disguise itself in many different ways. But ultimately, when the body and the mind are stressed, the focus is narrowed onto ourselves. It's a survival technique that is carried into a overwhelming, overutilized aspect of our lives in 2020 that is man-made for the majority of the stress we endure. And that stress, again, narrows our focus. It makes us focus on self, not on the purpose in which we want to do something. And I took 6 months to finally get out of my way and to speak my truth. And that's ultimately what this episode is about, speaking your truth. And that's all that I want to do. That's all I aim to do. That is my entire intention behind every aspect of my being today moving forward, is speaking my truth. It's walking my talk. It's being the change I want to see in the world and matching my actions to the words that I have the audacity to release out of my mouth. And that's what this episode's all about today. I'm sharing my truth. And in order to get to the next level in my life, I've had to shine a light on a lot of internal aspects of my being that I was resistant to as a part of my ego's protection mode to keep me safe from the unknown. I said I wanted to do these things. There was these hidden aspects of myself that I never dealt with, I never acknowledged, I didn't accept, and therefore I didn't understand what was happening with the resistance of things I said I wanted to do and why I wasn't doing them. And it's been a long time coming. I mean, I'm 31 years old. I'll be 32 this November. So in 5 months, 12 weeks, or 12 days to be exact. And the last few months, I've taken the deepest dive internally that I ever have. And I'm going to be updating you where I am in my life today and where I'm moving forward to and what the next month to 3 months look like for me. But I've been addressing those aspects of my being that were keeping me from doing the things that I said I wanted to do, the things I know I need to do, the things I feel strongly about doing, and why I wanted to do them. And so it took me 6 months to record this episode. And as I record this, I'm just making it up as I go. I felt compelled to share for many different reasons. Ultimately, again, I'm just speaking my truth. And my truth is that the more I share aspects of my being, the more people know the behind the scenes, the more people can relate and the more people can feel like they are not alone, they're not isolated, because that's how I felt. And a lot of my actions stem from a purpose of wanting to serve and support other people so they never feel isolated, they never feel broken, they never feel ashamed for being who they are, and so they can become aware or conscious of why they are the way they are, so that way they have a shot at changing who they are. So today is about 3 months, a little over 3 months into the stay-at-home orders. A lot of people like to call it the quarantine, but if you look at the definition of quarantine, this is not that. We are being ordered or recommended to stay at home. Things are starting to loosen up now. It's because of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic that's been occurring. And it's really interesting because the first time I actually started to take notice of this, because I don't watch the news. I try to stay away from that because my belief is the mainstream news just tries to they try to use fear tactics to keep people controlled and drama and stress, and it's just a bunch of nonsense. And there's some aspects that are important, there's some mostly that are not. But I choose to get my information from other various sources, which I'll probably be speaking about as these episodes evolve. But it was the beginning of March, and I was in Tampa with Brian, and we were visiting the Aspie in Tampa, Florida. And it was a day before we were heading back when a lot of events started getting canceled or postponed, and a lot of the media was starting to bring up the more severity of the coronavirus COVID-19 issue at hand. And I got home, I think it was March 12th. I got home. It was middle of the week or end of the week, and then I remember the last day I was just living kind of oblivious, kind of not really paying attention, but like kind of hearing about it, not giving it any energy. I bowled Sunday night as a practice with some of my teammates, getting ready for the Monday Night League. I actually bowled a 299. For those that don't know, a 300 is a perfect game. It's all strikes for one game, and that's the highest score I've ever had. So I was really excited about the next day being our league, which was why I was practicing. And it was the next day, later in the afternoon, when the league made a decision to cancel the league because of the COVID-19 issue at hand. And then it was that next day or the day after when the quote-unquote quarantine kicked in, the stay-at-home orders kicked in. And that's when it began to get pretty serious. A lot of things were shutting down. People were scared. People were acting in their own ways of fear. And it was interesting to watch. My life didn't really change much, except I wasn't traveling. The gym had closed down. The bowling alley had closed down. There was a lot of questioning, a lot of just different perspectives being shared and being witnessed, and I was opening my eyes to a lot of things. But for the most part, my day-to-day actions, my career, my, how I live my life didn't change much. I had Jackie home with me. She's an athletic trainer at Durham Academy, so she was home. She's been home. It's been over 90 days now. So we get to spend a lot of time together. We've been learning about each other, about ourselves separately. But ultimately, my days really didn't change. But the good that came from this COVID-19 situation is I and Jackie, we've been doing a lot of inner reflection, a lot of work on our inner world to figure out why we do the things we do, why we are the way we are, who we really are at our core. Remove all the smoke and mirrors, pull the curtain back, peel the onion, and look deep within ourselves. And I had a lot of this occurring as I was finishing writing my book. And I finished it. I put a chapter a day dedicated to the month of March. And I was trying to do this while traveling on planes and hotels. And about a little over half of March was at home, and I got my book finished, the rough copy. And then I sat on it for 2 months until recently, where I've discovered this insecurity of why I wasn't moving forward with the editing process. And so that's something now I've become aware of and I'm tackling. But some of the good that came from the COVID-19 situation for me personally is that it's allowed me to finish writing the book I've been thinking about writing for years, which a lot of events have occurred. So it's just added more context to the book, a lot more content, a lot more for people to relate to. And that's my purpose of sharing my story and all the learning lessons I've had. For Jackie, it's allowed her to seek other opportunity to make an income, and she's picked up her passion again for photography, and she's helped supplement her income through the athletic training that she's not able to do. She still gets paid a salary, so that's very fortunate for her. But she's seen the opportunity to grow in a maybe an overlooked area that she has passion for, and she's been getting all these new ideas. But ultimately, it's allowed the two of us, as I mentioned before, to look inward and to look at ourselves, where we want to go, what's holding us back. And that's a part of, again, today's episode with sharing your truth. And I was speaking my truth, but there was a lot of things holding me back from achieving that vision I'm working towards. There were still a lot of memories that were defining my personality, the way I think, the way I feel, the way I thought, the way I felt, the way I acted. And it was holding me back from being my truest self. And so today is one of many days now where I've been putting in the work and putting in the effort and in the investment in time and money and energy to discover my truest self, to speak my truest words, and to ultimately become the person I'm meant to become, the potential I have that's within me, that's within all of us. I've really been discovering that and believing that, more importantly. So the other aspect of where we are today in June of 2020 is we have the George Floyd incident, that horrific incident that we all witness, and what that's doing to our country, and what both of these aspects of the COVID-19 and the George Floyd, the injustice, the Black Lives Matter movement, like all of these pieces coming together. And we're seeing such an interesting moment in time where we have this documentation to make these things so real for so many of us that were oblivious to it, because it wasn't something we experienced. It wasn't something maybe we wanted to recognize. And it was something that stirred a lot of emotion inside of us that we weren't ready to deal with. So we dismissed it and we said we didn't agree, or we argued, or whatever it may be. And I was one of them. And I've shared how, because I grew up partially raised by a Black woman. My father married my stepmom, who is Black, when I was about 11 or 12. They get together, and I'm 31 now, so you do the math. I grew up with a lot of Black friends, and to me, I didn't see anything different. It was just a human being. It was some of my best friends. It was some of my family, still today. And the whole Black Lives Matter movement was really confusing to me because I didn't understand it. And I was like, no, all lives matter. Because as a loving human being, I believe every life matters. But that's not what Black Lives Matters is about. It's about the injustice that's happening to this group of people that are discriminated against because they look different. And there was a great video, I forget the name of it, from 1970s, where a teacher, if you're familiar with the story, you'll know, but a teacher was demonstrating how stupid this is by separating a white class, an elementary class, I believe, by their eye color, and then giving certain characteristics to blue eyes versus brown eyes, and making one feel better than the other for nothing other than their eye color. And so for me, I've been admitting how I was so ignorant to it because of my experience and where I came from and the people I surrounded myself from. And maybe they didn't share the things that they experienced as a Black person in American society, or maybe they didn't experience it themselves. I don't know. These are conversations I'm looking forward to having so I can understand better. But I was always quick to speak my truth, rather than understanding other people's truth. And that's something I'm learning to do more and more about any topic. Is there's chapter 5, I believe, or habit 5 of this book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's first seek to understand, then to be understood. And I was just seeking to be understood. I didn't understand something. And so for me, that triggered something internally to argue that, to defend my beliefs. And the more I peel the onion back, the more I pull the curtain back and look internally on myself, the more I realize that I need to seek to understand other people first. I need to have more empathy. And as someone that has built a business off of helping other people achieve empowerment and health and success in their lives, whether that's with, my Mito business, mentoring and coaching people one-on-one with their direct health and their fitness and their mindset, or it's speaking, or it's creating content. Before, I was kind of just speaking my truth in a manner of being understood from my understanding. I wasn't speaking my truth from my understanding of the individual I was trying to help. And so today, I've developed this new awareness to understanding people's language, understanding people's pain or their emotion or their perspective beneath the surface words. And that's where I've come with the George Floyd situation, something that was so horrific and vivid on video, which is a huge game changer for today's society of being able to transfer information around the world in a fast pace. Is now people can't argue certain things. And that's where truth versus facts come in. I'm speaking my truth. My truth doesn't mean it's factual. Those are two different things. But when you have evidence, a video of something demonstrating something that you've been unwilling to recognize in your past, you can't argue that. Whether someone's perception of that is different from the other person, you can't argue what you just saw. And that's a fact. And so when you speak your truth, you have to remember that's based on the lens you choose to see your life with, which oftentimes, more times than not, is unconscious choice. You don't know that you're choosing that lens because that choice is subconscious, which is based off of your past memories and experiences and feelings from the events that occurred in your life, and then how that snowballed, and all these sensory input information that we take in is lumped into different categories because what is it? We take in 200 billion bits of information every second. It's distilled to like 126 bits by delegation, deleting, generalizing, and grouping, and all these things. And so our perceptions are built of our past experiences. And we know when we get into our 30s or so, 95% of how we operate as a human being is unconscious, is an unconscious program that until we're aware of, we don't know why we live the life we do, or why we feel the way we do, or why we have the thoughts that we think, or why we make the decisions that we make, which ultimately create the reality that we live in. It's based off of our personality, which is cemented by 95%. And so when you become aware of that and you dive deeper into that, you can become an observer of the program you are living by. And then you can slowly move into the seat of the programmer. You can start reprogramming these operating systems in which you operate from. And that's where I think a lot of people are struggling today. And that's a part of my sharing this message and being authentic and vulnerable. And all my efforts in today's life, today's life, is to bring awareness to people to these facts and these learnings and these truths of mine and these experiences. And my main objective is to shift someone's perspective in a manner that allows them to see their life differently by maybe using my lens for a minute. They can see life from my view in the past, and then they can contribute that to their perspective, their experiences, their knowledge, or their lack thereof, and make a decision of how they want to move forward. And something I want to say about when you decide to do that, your body is going to show a lot of resistance because it's the unfamiliar territory you're moving into. And that's your ego trying to protect you from the unknown. Your ego was developed when you were younger as a survival technique to keep you from danger. And for so long that we've lived unconscious to that, these lessons just keep building on top of one another, and to the point where we're afraid of anything that's not familiar. And it's really interesting when you start taking that shield off and you start looking behind it and looking at yourself and your truest desires, your truest beliefs, and these limiting beliefs that we have and where they came from. And ultimately, that's the step to change. And I see so much lack in that area happening. And I don't say that from a place of judgment, of superiority, or like I'm better than you, or this or that. Like, I'm just observing. I know I'm a flawed human being. That's what makes us human. We want and we strive to be as good as we can, but we're flawed. And I'm just seeing so much lack of empathy, of understanding, of perspective, of acceptance of our own selves, and so much selfishness because we're scared. And that's okay. And that's totally acceptable. We're all scared. We're all emotional. But what I see an issue with is the lack of sharing, these thoughts and these, just basically a lack of understanding. Like, try to understand someone else that doesn't have the same experience of you, especially if they look different from you. And for me specifically, I'm voicing now my truth of how I was ignorant to these topics. And now that I've tried to understand, I've had empathy for the other person, and I understand that I won't ever understand what they've gone through, but I can relate because I've gone through experiences in my life that most people won't ever experience. When you're facing having your skull cut open to remove something that's taking over your life, and that you're scared literally for your life, not many people can relate to that. And that's not their fault. That's not something that I take lightly. And that's something that allows me to have empathy for other people going through experiences that I don't relate to or quite understand. But I can understand a little bit about the fear that they're going through. Not on the same level, not in the same context, but just fear is universal. And when you've had that visceral feeling of fear, especially when it's for your life. That is not something that we enjoy. That is not something that I personally wish anyone to deal with. And when I see people experiencing that, whether it's racism, it's sexism, it's any kind of fear, that really, really brings up a deep emotion of anger and sadness inside of me. So I've decided to start speaking out on behalf of my beliefs and share my truth. And what I mentioned at the beginning of this was it's so interesting to see people's fear and selfishness and lack of understanding, lack of empathy, and fear of change really coming out to the point where I'm having people that I know slightly personally, or I just am aware of them. They've been a follower or friend for some time, but that haven't engaged in my content or haven't engaged much over the years that I've been producing content, and are now deciding to share their objections and deflections and really project their own insecurities and fears onto my content, when they could have easily made a decision to say, I disagree with that, and then shared their belief on their platform. And it's an interesting aspect because I do my best to share my truth, to share my experiences, my perspectives, and not to judge other people, not to tell people they're right or wrong, not to come from a place of superiority, but to share my truth. And it's always in an effort. It may not come off that the best way. It may not resonate with everyone, but my intention is for people to empower themselves to become the best versions of themselves, to love one another, to love themselves, to take care of themselves, to educate themselves, to change their perspectives, because all of these pieces are going to lead to people taking new action. And I've witnessed that in my life. I've witnessed that in others, and I'm witnessing that right now. A lot of people are having these emotional experiences and these emotions stirred up from recent events, and they're choosing, sometimes consciously, a lot more times unconsciously, to act moving forward. And I think until we can first seek to understand the opposite side, the other people than ourselves, especially those that look different, act different, come from different backgrounds, whatever you want. I think that that's the first piece, is to understand and then seek to be understood. Because until you have perspective of other aspects of life rather than just your own, it's going to be hard to get your message across. And I've experienced that in the past. And again, like I said, I'm trying to do my best to share that even more moving forward, as a understanding of kind of both or multiple perspectives, but just share my experience. And it's just really interesting to see the negativity I'm receiving right now. And I'm not making this experience about me, because it's not. It's about a larger picture. But ultimately, I'm trying to contribute to the change that I feel and that I see a lot of people feel it needs to occur. And it's I don't know. It's just interesting to see the opposition to the change and how many people are living in pain, whether they're involved directly or indirectly of the current events, just the pain and conflict. And that's something I've recognized in myself, as there was this gap in how I wanted to feel, how I wanted to be, how I wanted to be seen as, and what I was feeling internally at the moment. And that's when the inner work really comes in. And so if I can share anything, my one takeaway that I hope you take from this is to not be afraid to speak your truth, but make sure you speak your truth from a place of understanding, a place of judgment free. I don't know how I would say that, but lack of judgment, but a place of love, not a place of hatred, not a place of defense, not a place of insecurity, but maybe take a moment to think and then to speak your truth. There's nothing wrong with your truth. Just know that it's not factual. Other people may disagree. Other people may oppose. And it's okay to have debate. But remember to be respectful and understanding that not everyone has the same experience as you. Therefore, your truth may not resonate with everyone. But at the end of the day, it's your truth. And all that we have in this life is our truth. No one can take that from us. No one can take our perspective away from us. And like I say, every single day we have two major important choices: our nutrition, what we choose to consume with our mouths, what we choose to put in our bodies, and more importantly, what we choose to put in our minds, because that's going to dictate everything moving forward. So I just would encourage you to speak your truth, try to understand the other side before you try to be understood. And if you have to, educate yourself personally, look into your inner self, and externally, look at the stories of other people, look at, history, educate yourself on other topics, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, speak your truth.